The evening had been carefully planned. My father liked events that looked perfect from the outside. The house was full of warm lights, elegant decorations, and guests dressed in expensive suits and formal dresses. Soft music played in the background while waiters moved between tables carrying drinks. It looked like a celebration. In a way, it was. My father had invited business partners, old friends, and several important people from the city to announce something he called a new chapter for the family. The large living room of our house had been arranged almost like a small ballroom. A long table held expensive food, and tall windows showed the quiet garden outside. Everyone seemed relaxed. Everyone except me. I stood near the back of the room, watching the guests talk and laugh while holding a glass of water that I hadn't even touched. My brother stood beside my father near the center of the room. He looked confident, smiling as he spoke with several of the guests. My father seemed proud, but not of me. He rarely looked in my direction. That alone told me something unusual was about to happen. When my father finally stepped forward to speak, the room slowly grew quiet. He raised his glass and smiled at the guests. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began.
People nodded politely.
"This evening is very important to our family." A few guests applauded softly. My father placed his glass down on the table beside him and continued. "For years, I have worked to build something strong for the future of this family." He looked toward my brother. "And I'm proud to say that the next generation is ready to continue that work." My brother nodded respectfully. The guests looked impressed. I remained where I was, standing quietly near the wall. My father took a slow breath. "However," he said, his voice becoming firmer, "sometimes a family must make difficult decisions." The room became quieter. Even the music seemed to fade into the background. My father turned his head slowly, and this time he looked directly at me. "Tonight," he continued, "I must make one of those decisions." Several guests followed his gaze and turned toward me. A strange feeling settled in my chest. My father spoke again. "From this moment forward, you are no longer part of this family." For a second, the room went completely silent. Some guests thought they had misunderstood. Others looked shocked. My brother lowered his eyes slightly, but said nothing. My father's voice remained calm. "I believe it is best for everyone if our paths go in different directions." A woman near the front table covered her mouth quietly. Someone whispered, "Did he just?" But my father didn't stop. "You will no longer represent this family, and you will no longer have any connection to our business or our home." The words hung heavily in the air. All eyes were on me now. I could feel the weight of every stare in the room. But strangely, I didn't feel angry, or even surprised. Instead, I slowly placed my glass on the nearby table. Then I stepped forward. The guests moved slightly aside as I walked toward the center of the room. My father watched me carefully. "You may leave now," he said. I looked at him calmly. Before I could answer, something unexpected happened. The front door opened. Everyone turned. Standing in the doorway was a man wearing a dark suit and holding a small leather folder. He stepped inside slowly. "Good evening," he said. His voice was polite but firm. "I apologize for arriving unannounced." My father frowned slightly. "Who are you?" The man looked around the room. Then his eyes stopped on my father. "I'm here regarding a legal matter." Several guests exchanged curious looks. The man continued walking toward us. "My name is Shane," he said. "I'm the family attorney." My father's expression changed immediately. "I wasn't expecting you tonight." Shane nodded. "I know." Then he opened a folder in his hands. "And that's exactly why I needed to come." The room fell silent again, because suddenly the evening wasn't about a family announcement anymore. It had become something very different. And my father was about to realize that his decision had arrived at exactly the wrong moment. The room remained silent as Shane stepped further inside. The guests had expected the evening to continue with speeches and celebrations, but now no one was sure what was happening. My father looked slightly irritated. "This isn't a good time," he said firmly. Shane nodded politely. "I understand." Then he glanced at the people gathered around the room. But what I have to say concerns everyone here. That caught the guests' attention immediately. Several of them leaned closer. My father crossed his arms. What exactly is this about? Shane opened the folder in his hands and carefully removed a document. This concerns your father's estate. My father's expression tightened slightly. My father passed away years ago, he replied. Yes, Shane said calmly. But his final legal review was completed only last week. The room grew even quieter. My brother stepped closer. What review? Shane turned one of the pages so my father could see it. Your father left detailed instructions regarding the future ownership of the family business. My father frowned. I already own the company. Shane shook his head slightly. You manage the company. That's the same thing. Not according to this document. A murmur moved through the room. My father's voice grew sharper. What are you saying? Shane looked down at the paper briefly before answering. The ownership of the company was placed in a trust. My brother blinked in confusion. A trust? Yes. And the final ownership was scheduled to transfer this year. My father's face had become very still. To whom? He asked. Shane closed the folder slowly. Then he turned his head
and looked directly at me.
The guests followed his gaze. The silence became heavy again. Shane spoke clearly. The ownership transfers to the person your father named as successor. My father's voice dropped. And who is that? Shane answered calmly. The one person he believed would protect the company's future. He paused. Then he said the name. Zunri. For a moment, no one moved. My father looked stunned. My brother stared at me in disbelief. Several guests began whispering quietly. That can't be right. Did he say Zunri? My father stepped forward quickly. That's impossible. Shane didn't react. It's written clearly in the trust documents. My father's voice rose. You must have made a mistake. Shane calmly handed him the paper. You're welcome to read it. My father's hands tightened slightly as he took the document. The room watched him silently as his eyes moved across the page. His expression slowly changed.
Shock,
then disbelief, then something else, because the document was real. And suddenly the announcement he had made only minutes earlier had just become a very serious mistake. The room was completely silent. My father stood in the center of the living room holding the document in his hands. For the first time that evening, he looked uncertain. The guests watched him carefully. Some of them had known our family for years, and they had never seen him like this before. My brother finally spoke. Is it true? My father didn't answer immediately. He read the document again, slower this time. Every page said the same thing. The ownership of the company had never been his. He had only been managing it until the final transfer date. And that transfer date had already passed. My brother looked at Shane. So, what happens now? Shane replied calmly. The company now belongs to the person named in the trust. Everyone turned toward me again. My father slowly lowered the document. The anger in his face had faded, replaced by something closer to disbelief. You knew about this? He asked. I shook my head.
No.
That was the truth. My grandfather had never told me about the trust, but he had spent many afternoons teaching me how the business worked. He used to say something that I remembered very clearly. Leadership isn't about who speaks the loudest. It's about who listens. Shane closed his folder. The transfer became official this morning, he explained. My father's voice was quieter now. You're saying she owns the company? Yes. A guest near the window whispered softly. Well, that changes things. My father looked around the room at the people who had come to celebrate his announcement. Then he looked back at me. For the first time that evening, his voice lost its authority. You can't possibly run the company. I stepped forward calmly. I don't need to run it alone. The room listened carefully now, because the situation had completely changed. The same person who had just been publicly disowned was now the legal owner of the family business. I looked at the guests gathered around the room. Many of them were business partners,
Investors.
people who had worked with the company for years. Then I said something simple. The company will continue exactly as it should. My father said nothing. My brother looked uncertain. I turned toward Shane. Thank you for bringing the documents. He nodded politely. That was my responsibility. The room slowly began to relax as people realized the evening was not ending in chaos. Instead, something unexpected had happened. A quiet correction. My father looked at me one last time, but this time he didn't speak, because the decision he had made in front of everyone was no longer the one that mattered. The guests slowly returned to their conversations, and as the evening continued, one thing had become very clear. My father had publicly removed me from the family, but he had just discovered that he could not remove me from the future.